Hello, everybody. My name is Jolene Rowe, and I'm one of the admins at the Endo Challenge. Tonight's Q&A will feature Juneau Biosciences. They're an organization that is conducting a study to identify genes that contribute to the development of endometriosis. And tonight we're going to be talking to Karen Miller, the Chief Medical Consultant for Family Studies Research, Katie Cederholm, the RN Director of Family Studies, and Katie Cederholm, the Director of Media Outreach. So welcome, ladies, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jolene Rowe, and I'm one of the admins at the Endo Challenge. Tonight's Q&A will feature... Hold on. Sorry about that, everyone. A little feedback. Okay, we're good to go. So would you ladies like to talk a little bit about what you do before we jump into the questions?
We would love to, yes. Let me tell you a little bit about Juneau Biosciences. We are a private research firm that deals with women's health issues. And one unique fact about our firm is that our founder and our chief medical officers are all gynecologists who have spent many years in the clinical care of women. This is really exciting for us because there's a big difference when you're conducting research about a disease that you understand and a population that you understand compared to other genetic research firms that are usually, the studies are usually conducted by geneticists. So that's something that sort of helps us stand apart from the other research firms. The work that we're doing, we're collecting saliva samples from women around the world in order to identify and discover the genetic markers that are found with women with endometriosis. With this information, we plan to develop a non-invasive test which will finally make an early diagnosis of endometriosis possible for all women. And the women in our study are not being tested or testing a product, but rather they're contributing to making a difference for future generations of women to come. And I'd like to go over more information about our study. For those of you that can't stay throughout this whole broadcast, I would like you to take a moment to jump onto endoendo.com. www.endoendo.com to find out more information. That's a brief overview of our study.
All right, great. Well, shall we just jump into everything and get it rolling? Okay, so the first question we have are what types of tests are being considered for non-invasive diagnosis?
So the test that we're doing is strictly, obviously it's a genetics test, and the way that you would obtain your sample would be either through a cheek swab or a saliva sample or a blood sample. Currently, what we're doing is collecting saliva samples for women. The other kinds of tests that would be possible that are considered and being done in research that are non-invasive would be radiological studies, some blood protein studies. The disadvantage with those are that those are tests that only can show you something if you're currently dealing with endometriosis. Whereas with the genetics test, we'd have a predictive quality to it. So whether you have actual symptoms or you're eliciting soliciting help from a physician as an intervention, you wouldn't necessarily have to have active endometriosis to be diagnosed with a genetics test. So that's one of the easy things, because genes never change. So you can have multiple conditions going on. You can be at various stages of your endometriosis. So you may be in a suppressive mode. You would still be diagnosed no matter what because your genes are stable. So.
That's really, really incredible. It's definitely a million times better than laparoscopic surgery just to diagnose. So
right, and because it is predictive, you could do it much sooner than you would have to do. Ideally, that's what an early intervention test would do. Is you would never have to get to the point where you're going to have a laparoscopy. You just simply have a cheek swab or a blood sample to tell you that, yeah, that's really what you have.
Wow, very cool. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And let me know, could you let us know if you can't hear us? I mean,
you sound great.
Okay.
Good to go. I was going to say, I guess that kind of leads us into our next question, which is how many ladies have been tested so far?
Well, if you want to be technical about it, no one has actually been tested. because we're not in our final version of our study. However, of our test rather. However, we do have 5,000 women from all over the world that have joined our study and have submitted their DNA sample. And this may seem like a large number. However, when you are studying a complex condition, you need a vast number of participants for our study. So the more women we have, the more accurate our results can be. And every woman counts. So we definitely want to thank all of the women that participated thus far. It's so helpful. And you know, we hope that, you know, as you participate, you'll pass the word to your family and friends about this study.
Absolutely. And so I know that there have been a few studies done that have shown endometriosis was found in prepubescent children and also in men. Have you gotten any samples from that that
cohort, so to speak? We actually have not looked at men or children at this point in time. Because we know that you get your genes from both your mother and your father, when we're testing women, we know that there's a contributory factor from both of those things. And until we have more of a panel of a test, we wouldn't want to be utilizing that in my teeth are
getting in the way.
No, my retainer is, my tongue is. Anyways, we wouldn't do it on children just yet.
Okay.
And the other thing is that what we have done, though, is we have collected families. And so we do have groups of people who, because we know that there's a higher incidence of genetics in families, we do collect families that have a pretty strong history. So we're going to look at that eventually at some point. So.
Okay. So I know that you guys are kind of studying the genetics. Have you noticed any environmental factors, endocrine disrupting chemicals?
Very good. Yeah, like you said, we are not studying that, so that doesn't show up in our research. But you know, we know about the endocrine disruptors, the dioxin, the Agent Orange, that's kind of the classic one, and then there are about 12 different worldwide recognized, what do they call them, persistent environmental pollutants or organochlorinated pollutants that, you know, and some of these are probably associated with endometriosis. And one of the things that scares me is some of these are plasticizers, which if you have, when you make plastic, basic plastic, you can't do anything with it. It's just brittle. So they put a variety of these substances into plastic, like into the vinyl of your car. And yeah, I know. It's so unfortunately, we are all exposed to some of them. And
right.
Yeah. And
do you? Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just to say, yeah, we really don't know which ones are most important.
Okay. Do you think that's something you might look at in the future, or are you going to keep narrowing it down mainly into genetics?
Well, you know, as a matter of fact, some of your genes are going to determine whether you are susceptible or resistant to having a problem based on environment. So we expect and hope that some of the genetics will be involved in the non-genetic factors, and we'll be able to sort that out.
Ah, okay, that makes sense. Okay, thank you for explaining that. Our next question is have you found any indicator that endometriosis is a autoimmune disease? Can genes alone attest to how severe the endometriosis will be, the stage?
Well, genes do cause or influence both having endometriosis and how severe it becomes. So therefore, the autoimmune system and the immune system is definitely involved. It appears that about 50% of endometriosis is determined by genes, and the other 50% is somehow influenced by other factors, environmental, obviously. So it's partly an autoimmune. Although autoimmune conditions are more common in women with endometriosis, we found that, I'm sure, in talking to other women, you're like, I have this, I have that. And inflammatory factors are clearly involved in the development of endometriosis. This is what puts endometriosis in the category of such a complex disease, because there's just so many variables that influence how it's going to present. And because everybody's genes are a little bit different, the presentation is not a patterned response. So that's a little bit harder for us to tell you. Hopefully, as we look at more and more genes and we look at the whole genome, you're going to be able to say these factors have an influence and these don't. And that's why, more the better that we get for participants and more studies. I mean, more people doing research on endometriosis as a whole just means we're going to know a whole lot more about this. So.
Absolutely, yeah. All right. Let's see. Sorry, I've got my little notepad here. So what exactly, have you kind of narrowed it down? Have you seen any genetic factors that you think may cause endometriosis specifically, or?
Well, we've I guess found or confirmed some of the, I guess, pardon me, I'm not sure how to start the sentence, but the obvious thing is that it is polygenic, that we know that there's several genes involved, and it's also very likely individual, so that you may have a different complex of genes than somebody else does that leads to endometriosis, or a white woman may have a different complex than a black woman, or so we think that it's really tricky. It's going to be tricky to sort out. I mean, we're sure that there's not one endometriosis gene, and we're going to find it, or somebody's going to find it.
Sure.
So we have to figure out the interactions. But one of the interesting things is about recent genetic mutations, because we think that recent mutations are important in a condition that also leads to infertility. So if, why isn't it just kind of slowly dying out in the population? And it's not. But then recent genes are those that were changed less than 10,000 years ago. And old genes are the ones that developed more than 10,000 years ago. But there are different genetic techniques to look at these different factors. So we're paying a lot of attention to that.
Okay.
And as far as the, what the genes do, Peaches was pointing out that they have multiple different systems that are involved. One thing we found that we think is important is factors that govern how cells change. You may be familiar with either a word called metaplasia or something about morphology. Anyway, some cells are able to change from this kind of cell to that kind of cell, and we think that may be important in endometriosis. Let's see, what else was I going to say about this? Just to also mention that a lot of people know this, but that there are genes that turn on other genes and genes that block other genes. And so we're not just looking for the genes, we're looking for the genes that govern the genes.
Yeah.
The complexity.
Yes, yeah. So I do have a slight question that kind of goes a little off, but it's not a hard one. So I know you mentioned that, there can be multiple things that cause endometriosis to occur, and, in some cases just one thing, or all variations. Is that something that normally happens in complex diseases, or is it unique to endometriosis?
No, it's not at all unique to endometriosis. And that's, the complex diseases are so difficult to study, and I don't know a single one where the genetics have been worked out, because it's not only what you have in your body, but it's also how it's interacting with different parts of your body, and then you add the environment. So complex disorders, some of the cardiovascular ones and diabetes ones we understand a little bit about, but not about endometriosis next.
Man, hopefully soon, huh?
I just want to say one more thing, though. Across various studies, and in our study, we found that obesity gives you a lower risk of having endometriosis. So there's one good thing about being obese. How do you like that?
So
It
eat Twinkies
so it
tonight.
makes you more unlikely to have it.
Unlikely.
Oh, yeah, so it's, pardon me, it's more unlikely. Did I say likely? Sorry. Yeah, and this is not necessarily a cause. It's an association that's found that you find more endometriosis in skinny women than in fat women. But, you know, it's just a funny association. Well, good.
Yeah. So on that note, have you looked at any women that may have gained weight who started out with endometriosis? Like, did that have any sort of effect on the?
I don't think anybody's looked at that because no, this is, like I say, just an association, not necessarily a cause. And so I don't think anybody's, well, actually there's a European group and a group out of Boston that are trying to really gather all the factors associated with endometriosis into something we can understand better. But that's just ongoing research right now.
So just to add on to that, there are groups that are studying groups of women for longer periods of time too, to see how some of those things can be influenced. And I think that one of the things that we have to look at in endometriosis is how can we collaborate with these various studies and these, you know, all of this research that's being there to make some sort of a big, you know, to brew a whole big pot of it all together and come up with some final answers. And I think that a lot of researchers and a lot of the community, the endo community, is finally, I feel like, dialoguing more about that than they ever have before.
And that's thanks to the pressure from the women.
Yeah.
Thanks to
And groups
pressure.
like you.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have so much power to make a change in this and to make your voice really, really count for a change. And I think that that's the only way we can ever really move very forward is until you guys really, really speak up for yourselves. You know, unfortunately, the medical profession just doesn't have enough information on how to deal with endometriosis to be able to really, really strongly toot a horn in any one direction. They don't know the answers themselves. And because every woman who, if you're talking to them right now, you're talking to a bunch of women who all present, every one of them, with different symptoms and varying degrees of severity. So it's a really, really difficult. When we're talking about complex, we're talking about so many complexities, different pain pathways that a woman might have that one woman doesn't have. Those all need to be developed more, and they're just, it's really in infancy. At least is my impression in endometriosis. From what I read, it's like we've got a ways to go, but it's really, really a positive place to be because we are getting there. We're finally looking at it. We're finally getting women to say yes, and we're getting doctors to say, let's try to figure out what we can do. And so it is kind of a fun place to be.
And even though we don't understand a lot about endometriosis, and there's been way, way too little research in it, there are treatments that help a lot of women. I think like the majority of women can find a good treatment that really helps them. You know, whether it's the pills or surgery, you know, they can get help in it, but
Yes.
obviously not everyone gets the help they need, and that's where we kind of get stuck at, well, gee, we don't know very much.
Well, and I think the other thing is more and more people are becoming aware of the word endometriosis. It's becoming more spoken of. And so as that woman learns that she can talk about her symptoms and feel more comfortable to talk about her, there's an empowerment in that. And also it means that a physician can act on what she can say. She no longer has to think it's always in her head. You know, I mean, it really is a legitimate thing, and we can start looking for people who can help us.
Absolutely. And I think with the early diagnosis too, you know, that's gonna really, it's available to doctors and they know, hey, I can check this and it'll be super easy to do it. I think that'll really help with the early diagnosis a lot.
That's the plan.
So this is something you probably we didn't really discuss touching upon, but I have a little girl who had early signs of puberty. She at 9 months of age, and we have a family. I personally have a family history of it, and of endometriosis. And for me, it would be really a big groundbreaking thing to have an endometriosis non-invasive test that can allow early detection.
Absolutely.
So it's amazing how this research really will be groundbreaking one day for the future generations to come.
Yes, I know it took me about 16 years to get diagnosed. So
Oh.
yeah,
I'm so sorry.
I am definitely all for early diagnosis. So, where were we? Got a little off on a tangent, but that's okay. It was all good. So, have they considered any, oh, we already asked that, I'm sorry. Have you noticed any correlation with MTHFR and endometriosis at all?
So not exact, no. I mean, the short answer is no. The longer answer is there is at least one paper that shows that MTHFR seems to be interacting with another gene to cause endometriosis. But there are a few good studies, and they were all compiled in a big study in 2014. And MTHFR is not showing up as its own individual self.
Okay. Okay. I know that's a popular one. We got asked a lot. There must be a lot of ladies that have had that show up. How about, have you seen any connection with mutations such as CBS or CSULT, CYT, or COMT?
Well, you had given us these questions, so I had to look every one of those genes up. First of all, just to even know what they're called. And let me just give you an example of, like, CBS is cystathionine beta synthase, and it's important in homocystinuria. And you know, the names are difficult to comprehend in a simple way. But all those genes that you mentioned, the CBS, the SULT, the CYT, and the COMT, no, they are not showing up in the large studies looking for endometriosis genes. But there are, I can read you the list of the ones that are. There's only about between 7 and 12.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm sure a lot of people would be interested to know that.
Okay, one of them is WNT, WNT4, and that has to do with embryonic sexual development, like promoting females and repressing males, and it has to do with how cells signal each other and a bunch of stuff. GREB1, GREB1, growth regulation by estrogen in breast cancer. So this is important in the estrogen receptor. And if you ever want just to have a laugh, read these names and then try to figure out where they came from, because, you know, the names are sometimes they're named for the fruit fly that it was discovered in, or, you know,
Hilarious.
IDA4, which inhibits DNA binding, and helps suppress tumors, has been found. CDKN2B-AS1, which is an antisense RNA, probably affects how susceptible you are to several diseases, including endometriosis. That's Verzatin adherens junction transmembrane protein, has to do with how things, transmembrane, how things get in and out of a cell. Fibronectin 1, or FN1, is important in cell adhesion and migration. So what cells stick to each other and where cells move to. And that's particularly associated with severe endometriosis.
Yes.
And there's RND3, which Rho family GTPase3. It appears to inhibit cells sticking together. EDC42, or cell division cycle 42. And that regulates pathways that have to do with a whole lot of different functions, including the shapes of cells and whether they migrate and whether they incorporate other molecules into themselves. And then the final one I'll mention is HNRNPA3P1, which has shown up in our study as being an important marker for endometriosis, but it is actually, when you look it up, it's a non-functional gene. It's a gene that outlived its function 10,000 years ago. But it still can be a marker. We're looking for things that, you know, shout, this woman has endometriosis, and regardless of whether it's an old or new or functional gene or not.
Yeah. Huh, that's pretty interesting. It's kind of like the appendix of the genes.
Very good. Very good.
So I know this next question, after all that we've talked about, is probably going to be kind of a loaded question, but How close are you to specifically identifying the genes?
Great question. And I think we've talked about how difficult this really is going to be to identify it. And I don't think there's going to be any one gene, and probably not any even 2 or 3. There'll probably be multiple genes for various different types of presentation. I think at this point, for us to say we will identify a gene, I would say we're a couple years out. We certainly have identified quite a few markers, and in fact, more markers than any other research at this particular time, and that's how we are going to develop our test, is with markers. But there are a lot of other researchers that are doing work, and together with what we find and what they find, it's not, it does seem that it would be possible within the next 2 to 3 years that you may in fact find somebody who's identifying genes. So I think it'll be a little like the breast cancer gene. You find one gene, that isn't the only gene you're going to find. There's going to be more than one. So I don't know if that was a good enough answer, but I think that kind of tells you. That's why we really support other people doing research, because when we make our panel isn't exclusive. So we're going to add all those markers that everybody's discovering and finding to make it be as big as it can be. So, and as good.
That's great. That's actually a lot sooner than I had thought it would be, to be honest. Maybe 20 years, and I was like, oh, God.
Well, and something that we haven't pointed out, but maybe we should, is that just because you participate in our study doesn't mean that you can't participate in other studies.
Mm-hmm.
We fully support your participation in as many studies as you want to be a part of.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
And let me just put a quote here from Peter Gregerson, who is an endometriosis genetics researcher. He's actually done a lot of other genetics, but now he's starting with endometriosis. And he said, in order to, this kind of research, it's not an easy path, it's expensive, and there's not a high likelihood of easy success. I mean, we think we have a likelihood of success, but it's a lot getting there. And so he said, in order to do this kind of research, you have to be unrealistically optimistic.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And we smile a lot, so there is a lot of optimism going on here.
That helps. I imagine you guys spend a lot of times in front of microscopes and.
Well, actually, genetic science is different. Even if you are a scientist, to be a genetic scientist is almost completely different, because you have to understand the genome, how it behaves, and know statistics so well, and figure out what kinds of statistics are going to give you a real answer compared to just false answers, which we just call noise. And that is not easy. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, we don't get to do some of the really interesting part of the research because we're not genetic scientists.
Oh, okay. I see. Okay. So you kind of got a whole.
But we have, yeah.
Okay.
Juneau Biosciences has genetic scientists.
Yeah.
But
right.
The 3 of us are not.
Right. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
We are a huge, we have a lot of different people working for the same cause.
Yeah. Yeah, and those genetic scientists would get nowhere if it wasn't for us.
Well, there you go.
Anywhere without
yes. Okay, so here's one that's not so complicated. So once you guys find a diagnostic test, how do you plan to have women tested? Will it be a part of like a panel of tests by their OBGYN, or do you think women that are already suspected of having it will have to get the test in order to be confirmed? Like, do you think it'll be something that'll be like a normal part of testing?
So initially, the test would be used in a smaller population than like just everyone that's going to the doctor. So they'd probably most likely be used in specialists who are dealing with pelvic pain and infertility. And okay. So we came with symptoms of things, that go, oh, let's try this, and it would be part of a panel that they would do at that time. And then as the test became more used and validates itself more and more, then of course it would go out into the general population and be used, as a panel like any other test would be. I mean, I think Katie's explained her passion. My passion obviously would be, and it really keeps us motivated to keep going, and that is because when you're working at something for so long and you're not seeing a test result right away, you can get disheartened. But the real thing is that we really believe that at some point in our lives, we're going to see where little girls can go into a doctor's office and a pediatrician can offer this test. That is what keeps us so motivated and driven to do this, because we feel like that's going to make a big difference. But in order to get there, you have to start somewhere, and you start with a smaller group and see that the test works and it gets validated.
And all the adolescents who come in with painful periods, they won't get blown off.
Right.
Somebody will say, well, let's do a test. Let's take you seriously.
Yeah. I mean, there is really.
Yeah, that will be so great. I know a lot of women, when they have children and they have endometriosis, their biggest fear is passing it on to their daughter. And so if there was a way to kind of, and they're small.
And that concern is legitimate. I mean, the numbers in the research has proven that there's a much higher likelihood that your offspring will have it if you yourself have endometriosis. So, I mean, I can see why they would be motivated to have that. And so we're hoping that we can be, an ally in finding something good for them.
So, okay. So once the study is completed, do you have any plans for dealing with medical professionals who still believe in theories such as retrograde menstruation? Do you anticipate any controversy or backlash?
Well, yeah, everything is going to have controversy or backlash. Every new thing is going to be resisted, and naysayers, and people who say it doesn't work. The biggest strength we have there is facts. If we have facts and we show that this is factually true, then you don't really argue about it. And even though we're not specifically studying how endometriosis starts or how it progresses, some of the genetic findings are going to lead eventually to that knowledge. And so then there'll be less fewer people just saying this and that as far as their theories. But we will be actively educating physicians. So when we have the test, we think, as I say, there's going to be a lot of resistance to introducing something new. It's going to cost and blah, blah. So we'll have to do a lot of education to physicians, because there are physicians out there who still think, oh, a diagnosis isn't all that important. I'm just going to give her birth control pills. And we want to show that getting an early diagnosis can be life-changing in a beneficial way, and that women deserve a diagnosis if they're having symptoms. Even if you say you're not going to treat it surgically, you deserve a diagnosis. And so we will be doing a lot of educating.
The other thing that isn't mentioned in this education process that's really important is educating insurance. That's because you can have a physician who might be like, I think this really has some validity, but it won't do you any good if you can't get that covered. And so, and for women, at this point, the initial women that we're testing have already spent a lot of money in medical, tests and medical procedures and time off of work and all of those things, that they don't have this big resource of money sitting out there that they can pay for all this other stuff. And so getting that reimbursed by insurance and proving to them that it's a valid and important testing and can make a difference in that long-term care of women, that is going to be what's going to be really, really the struggle, in my opinion, more so than any naysayers of physicians. So,
well, and it's almost certain that when we introduce the test, it will be a 2-3 year lag before it's really routinely covered by any insurance company or insurance companies.
Right.
So, we kind of expect that, and that's just the way our system works.
Okay.
But I think, like you say, when you can really show that not only this makes a difference in this individual woman's life as far as how she feels, but it changes the health care she has to obtain, that she doesn't have as many crises or problems or surgeries later on. That's what's compelling to insurance companies.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. So I know we're kind of going through these pretty fast. We've got about 2 questions left, and then maybe we'll do a wrap up. And I guess well, this one's fairly easy. It's how can I volunteer to participate?
Volunteering to participate is actually really easy. You can do it one of 2 ways. You can either contact us through our toll-free number, which is 888-362-4496, extension 4150.
Say that extension again.
Extension 4150, I'm sorry. They just barely added the 4 onto it, so I'm still getting used to adding that 4. However, the easiest way to do it is by going to our website, www.end2endo.com.
Yes. ENDTOENDO, so not the number 2, but
yes.
TO2.
Right out 2.
And we'll post that on the event page. Sorry, we'll post all that info on the event page in case anyone.
That's great. So, and that you would click on the Enroll Now tab, and that would take you through the process of enrolling.
Okay.
And that also gives you an opportunity to ask questions. So if you're not sure you really want to do it, you have some other questions you want to ask, it connects you, and we can, start to correspond with you either electronically or by phone.
Okay. So once you volunteer to participate, is it difficult, or what do you exactly have to do if you're selected?
So there's actually no formal selection process that occurs with our study. Anybody is eligible to participate if they've had an abdominal surgery with an evaluation of the pelvis. We need both true positives of women who are surgically diagnosed with endometriosis, and we also need true negatives, the women that have had surgery but have not been diagnosed with endometriosis.
Have been proven to not have.
Proven to not have endometriosis. So once you enroll, we send you a kit in the mail, and this kit contains instructions as well as a saliva collection container and some forms. As part of this study, we collect about 1.5 tablespoons of your saliva, and we also have you go over a few forms, one of which is a medical care and medical authorization form. And these forms are a necessary part of the study because we will need to review your records pertaining only to your endometriosis. Once you fill out those forms and you submit your saliva sample, we actually include prepaid postage. So you just drop the kit back into the mail that's sent back to us, and we take care of contacting your physician just for those records, and we take care of all the expenses, no expense to you.
Okay, very cool.
Is it at no expense to you, but we also reimburse you for your time and effort with a $25 Visa gift card. So not only are you helping with groundbreaking research for generations of women to come, but you get, to go shopping or buy a snack or something with that $25 Visa gift card.
From start to finish, it can take you a total of 15 minutes to do the whole thing. So once you get the kit, you open it up and do the forms. It's a 15-minute, and you're done. So it's pretty easy.
As I say, I've done the study, and it was super easy to do. It took no time at all. So,
yeah. But there are women like myself who just are going to do it, and a month later, you're still going to do it, and 6 months later, I'm going to do it. That's just the way it is.
Well, go do it. No. but yeah, I mean, and then I know I also get a lot of updates about the studies in my email, so that's always interesting to read about too. So I appreciate that information. Do you guys have anything to follow up with? Know that we've gone through all the questions. Anything you'd like to add in or tell our viewers?
Well, I didn't answer part of one of the questions, and just for the participant who submitted this question, I wanted to give that answer. Just that asking about how we deal with medical professionals who believe in retrograde menstruation as the cause of endometriosis. And our main thing is we're not going to try to impose our opinion on them. If it's still just an opinion, we're just going to stick with our science, and hopefully then our science leads to the right conclusions.
Okay. Here's the facts. Do it with you will, pretty much.
Well, yeah, because you can't really change somebody's mind by saying you're wrong.
Exactly. And then I know almost everyone that's pretty sure about 99.9% of everyone watching has endometriosis. Do you have any words of optimism for them or encouragement?
Well, we really want to thank you, first off. We've had the opportunity to talk with many of you on the phone, to meet many of you at the marches or at various endometriosis events. And your stories really do inspire us. There are times that we have been crying with you on the phone because of your stories. And we want you to know that you really do touch a soft spot in our heart. You inspire us, you make us want to work harder. And we just want to thank you for continuing to spread awareness and be advocates for this disease, and not only help this current generation, but future generations. We just applaud you for your efforts, and we thank you for being a part of our research and allowing us to be in your community and spread, awareness about our research with you. So thank you.
I was incredibly energized and enthused with the Endo march that I went to last year, because that's the first one that's the one I went to, because it really was women who have not had a voice having a voice. And of course it wasn't perfect, and of course a lot of people didn't participate, or this didn't happen or that didn't happen. But it really is, there is a groundswell here, and different endometriosis groups, and even if some groups don't like other groups, the more you can at least work together to speak out, that is happening, and it's so heartening, it's so enthusing, and it's so important.
Yes.
I think that it is always inspiring to see other women helping women. And I think that we need to set roles for young girls to see this, to see the power that it has. And so I've gone to these meetings and these groups and the march and whatever, I'm just inspired by what this can teach and empower our young women. And from that, I really thank you, because it empowers me to do more. So I'm glad to be part of it.
Yes, us too. Well, we just want to thank you guys for taking the time out of your day to do this. And I know it really answered a lot of questions that a lot of women had about, what it is you do. We hear about the study and we're like, well, okay, I'll send my spit off. But I really think this was very informative for people. And to everyone that's watching, thank you for watching. And we'll have the transcript posted online for you to read if you missed the event, as well as the video. And we just would like to thank everyone who participated. So thank you guys. Thank the Endo Challenge.
Thank you.
It's an honor and a pleasure.
Yes, and thank you for all the work that you're doing. We were so excited to watch all the profile pictures go yellow. And,
really great.
Very exciting. So thank you for all the hard work that you guys are doing at Endo Challenge. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully we'll talk to you guys soon, and we'll post all your information online. And
okay,
sounds great.
Call it good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night, ladies.
You too.